this is Michael Robbins from Gimbal Logic with a description and demonstration of a new inventory system that has been implemented in the QA Sandbox belonging to Shaw Commercial for the purposes of keeping track of inventory of samples in showrooms and potentially also in the custody of territory managers and account managers that are out in the field. So ultimately, one of the goals of this system is to be able to easily um, report on the quantities of particular items that are available in a showroom. I'm here on a list view of an object called inventory balance. We're going to be reviewing how all of this stuff is woven together, but I first want to give you a glimpse into how things might work. This is a list of all of the products that are in inventory in this particular showroom. And I can use the standard Salesforce methodology for filtering and retrieving records in order to get a view into how many of each item or whether each item um, is available at a particular warehouse. So I have a list of items, the quantities of those items that are available in that warehouse. I can switch to a different warehouse. And also I can type in a search term in order to filter the list further. So how does this all work? How is this implemented? And how are we going to use it? This diagram is what's called an entity relationship diagram, or an ERD diagram, which lays out the various tables in Salesforce that are being used for this inventory system and also describes the purpose of some of those tables. The yellow boxes are part of the managed package that is Gimbal Inventory. The blue boxes are standard objects that are available in every Salesforce organization. And the white item is an unmanaged custom object, something that we created specifically for the Shaw implementation. I'm going to first describe the managed package and how it's intended to be used and how it stores data, and then we'll move on to a discussion of how it interacts with the broader Salesforce environment around it, and then go into a demonstration of some functionality that is available to be used immediately in the sandbox for testing purposes in anticipation that you'll give us some feedback, and we'll proceed from there. Okay, so in the Gimbal inventory system, the core record that is going to be very important for reporting and analytics is this record called the inventory balance. And it is effectively a distinct combination of product and location. So for every inventory item and for every location at which there is a quantity of that item stored, there will be an inventory balance record. The inventory balance record will have the name of the product, the name of the location, and the current quantity stored at that location. And so based on those core three attributes, what is the product, what is the location, and what is the quantity that is currently on hand, the inventory balance record will be the foundation of much of the reporting that you'll do in Salesforce with standard Salesforce reporting and with things like list views. Now, underneath the inventory balance record is the inventory movement record. That is the transactional record that gets created, deleted, updated automatically whenever some inventory is moved into or out of a particular location. So if you have a location named Warehouse 1 and a particular product called red widgets, when you move 6 red widgets out of Warehouse 1 on November 25th, an inventory movement record is created in the system that records that movement of inventory of that product and that location and that quantity on that date. And so it becomes the fact that the sum of all those inventory movements, the sum of all of the ins and outs of inventory rolls up to the inventory balance to give the quantity. In that respect, this is a ledger, not all that different from an accounting ledger that has debits and credits. The inventory system has inventory movement records that are transactional records that get created whenever inventory moves in or moves out. In fact, they record the fact that inventory has moved in or moved out of a particular location. Whereas the inventory balance object is a very handy object for reporting on current inventory levels at a particular location. If it's desirable to report either historical inventory levels or um, aggregate historical transactions, how much has moved in and moved out and been adjusted and been received, etc., over time, then the inventory movement record, which has that critical date stamp on it for every inventory transaction, and also the categorization of what type of inventory transaction it is. Was it a receiving action, a consuming action, a transfer action, etc.? All of that is stored on the inventory movement record. In the process of doing a cycle count is the process of reconciling the inventory at a particular location. So doing a count and adjusting the ledger balance to whatever amount was counted, we call that a cycle count. In the process of performing a cycle count, inventory count records get created and updated. And whenever you start a new count, usually you wipe clean the list of counts so that we're basically starting from zero. We're not changing necessarily the balances at the moment, but we're going to count a bunch of records. And then when we're done counting, we're going to update the balance to match what we just counted. So that's the inventory count record. It's used temporarily only during the process of reconciling and counting inventory, whereas the inventory movement record is a more permanent record of inventory transactions. Okay, so the inventory balance record looks up to inventory locations and to products. The product object is already somewhat customized in the SHA Sandbox and production orgs, such that the user interface for accessing products has been is customized, and it may not be suitable for some of the inventory functionality. So as an option, we have created a new object called an inventory item, and that's where we're storing all of the detailed information about each item that was in the spreadsheet file that I received from Shaw with a list of about 35,000 different types of samples. Those are all inventory item records. And the product object is really being treated as a pass-through. So there isn't a lot of information with regard to inventory stored on the product object. The product object simply looks up to an inventory item record that has all of that detail, and we'll see more about that during our demonstration. But because the managed package is intended to be used with the product object, it's necessary to have some reference to the product object in order to have these inventory balance records. And finally, at some point in the future, you may decide that you want to use particular individuals as a warehouse. So recording that the salesperson or the territory manager named Jim Smith has a certain amount of inventory in his custody or in his possession or in the trunk of his vehicle or something like that. We may relate inventory location records to user records, but that's coming down the line. But anyways, this relationship already exists. Okay, so the main transactions that we have in the inventory system are receiving inventory, transferring inventory, and counting and adjusting inventory. There's also some functionality to consume inventory for a particular customer, like when you drop off inventory at a particular customer's location. We'll be looking at that as well. But in order to get started with some barcode scanning, we're going to need some barcodes to use for demonstration purposes. So I've gone to the inventory items object, and if you go to any custom list view of inventory items, that is anything other than the recently viewed default view, for example here, all records, you'll see a detailed list of all of the inventory items. If you select multiple records, you can then click a button labeled Print Selected Barcodes Matrix, and that generates an 8.5 by 11 sheet of barcodes for those items. So these barcode values are the barcode values of the inventory items that were imported from the spreadsheet. And I've printed out a page like this, and I have it sitting on my desk in front of me, and I'm going to use it for demonstration purposes. Okay. One very common inventory function is receiving inventory into a particular location. So this is not when we are transferring inventory between two locations within your possession. Rather, this is when some new samples are being inserted into the inventory system for the first time, either because we're doing our first count of a particular location or because we are receiving new materials from whoever has been assembling the new samples. So I go to the Receive Inventory tab. By the way, this is all within the Gimbal Inventory app in the Sandbox org, and I'm going to select a destination, Showroom 10, and click Continue. And now we see that the cursor is trapped in the scan box. If I try to click somewhere else, we should see the cursor come back there after a moment. And I'm going to scan 3 barcodes for 3 different items. And when I scanned those barcode, a new inventory movement record was created, which brought that item into that warehouse. And we see here, I have just received 1 of this item in this warehouse. And as a result, there are now 54 total of that item in showroom 10. But if I've got 5 of them sitting in front of me, I can either scan the other 4 items that are identical, or I can just click edit and type 5. And now we see that the total inventory at that location is 58 instead of 54 because I've modified the movement to indicate 5 instead of 1. Also, if I make a mistake and want to kind of start over from a particular movement, I can just click the delete button. Now, while reviewing information in the Receive Inventory page, if a question comes up regarding a particular item, it's possible to navigate to the detail page for an inventory item just by clicking on the link. And here we see all of the information about that inventory item. Typically, when receiving, it's a simple matter of simply scanning the barcode in order to receive the item. There isn't often much requirement to view all of the details of the item that is being received, since all of the items have been preloaded, but it definitely is possible. And if you want to get to the inventory movement record itself, of course, you can click on this link. So that's the receiving function. If you've received into one warehouse and now you're you want to receive into a different warehouse, then you just click this circular arrow here to change the destination into which you are receiving items. To transfer inventory, it's very, very similar, except now for transferring, we also have to select where we are transferring it from, in addition to where we are transferring it to. And I click continue, and it works the same way. I'm going to scan some barcodes in order to transfer particular quantities of particular items from one location to another. And on each record, we see the quantity of this actual transfer and the total quantity of this product at this location after that transfer has occurred. Now, we also have the option of going to a particular customer's record and delivering inventory to that customer. So this takes it out of our warehouse and consumes it to the customer effectively, giving us a permanent record of what we delivered to which clients on which dates. So I go to the account record, click the deliver inventory action, and proceed to scan barcodes in order to record that items were delivered to a customer. And of course, every time I scan a barcode, the system goes and finds that item in the inventory items list and inserts a new inventory movement record out of the selected location. All right. Things get more interesting, of course, when we do our count and adjust inventory function. So I go to the count and adjust function, and I select the inventory location that I am going to count inventory for. And I proceed to scan barcodes in order to count items. You know what? I'm going to start by resetting the count at this location. And we'll see we don't have any items counted at this location. I'm going to scan 3 barcodes. And rather than scanning the same barcode multiple times, I'm going to click this and say, you know what, I've just manually counted them, and I have 87 of these, and I have 75 of these, and I have 68 of these. And so I've counted 3 items in showroom 11. If I go to the Adjust tab, I can see those items here. Here I've counted 75 of these, 68 of these, 87 of these. The remaining items I have not counted. And we see that the ledger balance says I've got 88, meaning the inventory system currently records that there are 88 there. I have counted 75, but I could count over the course of a few hours or a few days, and this number may change as different people complete the count if you have multiple people working on it at the same time. But then when I'm done counting, I can select the items that I want to adjust and click Adjust Selected. When I do this, the ledger of these items, the ledger quantity of these items, is going to be adjusted to the same as the current count. And the way that that's going to happen is through the insertion of an inventory movement of type adjustment. So I've selected those 3 items. I'm going to click Adjust Selected, and we'll see that these items get updated. Click Adjust Selected. Because I'm about to adjust some inventory balances, I'm prompted to confirm that that is indeed what I intend to do. And I click OK. And we see now that the ledger balance and the count balance is identical for each of these items. And so I have reconciled and adjusted inventory for those items. Okay. Now, with regard to reporting, so as I demonstrated at the beginning of this demonstration, one of the best and easiest ways to quickly search inventory is through the list views on the inventory balances tab. And you can create whatever list views you want using whatever filters to bring in only particular records matching particular criteria. Because there's a relationship between the inventory balance and the item, I could also bring in other fields from the item in order to search. But really, getting this set up requires, like with many things in Salesforce, you'll have to use somebody with a little bit of administrative skill in Salesforce that understands how to create and edit list views. Many users of Salesforce have that skill themselves, but some companies choose to use their administrators in order to do that. And both methods are perfectly fine, but that's a core skill that's going to be required in order to get the inventory visibility that you're wanting, which is to be able to create and edit list views on the inventory balances tab. Now, I can also gain access to information using standard Salesforce reporting. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really the inventory balance object that we want to do most of our reporting on. One example is this current inventory matrix. So I've arrived here by going to the Reports tab, and I can get to this folder in multiple ways. These are recent reports. And I see now I have a matrix that lists the products. There's one product for each row and one column for each warehouse. And in the body of the report, I see the quantities. You know what? Let me change that to set the decimal places on that numerical field so it's a little bit cleaner. And these reports can be created and run, created by anybody, but sometimes a little bit of foreknowledge of how to use Salesforce reporting is required. So some companies use their administrators to generate the reports. Others, everybody has free reign to create their own reports, and that's also fine. So this is an example of one type of inventory report you could run. You could also create a list report where we have grouped the rows of inventory by location. We could also filter this report to only include a single location, and that's handy if you want to export the data to Excel or a flat file or something um, along those lines. So you can set up additional inventory locations if you like, just by going to the Inventory Locations tab and clicking the New button. You can create new inventory items by going to the Inventory Items tab and clicking the New button. I think there are currently somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 um, um, inventory items, one row in this list for every row in the spreadsheet that I received a couple weeks ago. Okay, so that concludes our basic demonstration of the initial Gimbal inventory functionality in the QA sandbox belonging to Shaw. I look forward to our upcoming meeting.